Ken Paxton is a clown. Give me a break. Oh no, we can't make laws that cause permanent consequences, not in Texas. Control, control, control. That hit me so hard. This is what you voted for. Oh my God, this is nonsense. I can't. We have a few updates on reproductive health news and specifically the abortion discussion regarding Texas and some legislative things that have been going on there that we need to go over. So I had discussed last time about other people who had been added to the legislation in Texas suing the state of Texas for inability to access needed terminations, including a friend of mine. If you haven't seen that video, please go back and watch it before this one because this includes some updates regarding some of the things we talked about in that video. And I also think that is a very important video. On December 7th, the Texas Tribune reported that a Travis County judge decreed that a 20-week pregnant person with a baby that had been diagnosed with a lethal anomaly was able to access abortion. So what that means is Travis County, which is where Austin is basically, somebody who was pregnant and had found out that they had a fetus with trisomy 18, which is a lethal anomaly, had petitioned the judge to let them access a termination. And they said yes. Trisomy 18 is a genetic condition that occurs spontaneously, meaning it's not passed down from parents. It just occurs de novo as a mutation in the genetics. You've probably heard of trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome. Trisomy 18 is similar in the way that it happens, but different in that it's almost always lethal prior to, during, or just after birth. There are a few stories of babies with trisomy 18 who have lived longer than hours or days after birth, but those are the exception, not the rule. And we should not be deciding people's courses of action based on these extenuating circumstances. Everybody should have a choice. Nobody should be forced to terminate any pregnancy. Nobody should be forced to carry a pregnancy with a fetus that has a lethal anomaly. I've talked about this ad nauseum about how hard of a choice this is, the risks that come along with it, mentally how hard it is for people. Most of these pregnancies are very wanted, and nobody who is choosing to end their pregnancy due to this, especially at 20-ish weeks, is doing it because they think that that will be fun. This is horrible. And every single time in this situation, whether they choose to carry the pregnancy to term or not, who is tasked with making an impossible, heartbreaking, horrible decision between two really bad options. Continue a pregnancy with this baby with a diagnosis that will almost certainly take their life before or just after birth. Go to the grocery store every day, belly's getting bigger, clerk says, oh my gosh, how long until the baby's born? What's its name? And you say it's a boy, but he's gonna die after his birth at some point very soon. Or you have a very wanted pregnancy, you live in a hostile state, or even if you don't, and you have to choose to do what you feel is the most humane thing for your baby and end the pregnancy at an earlier gestational age. Neither of these are good options. Nobody wants to be in this situation. I'll pull up the Texas Tribune article so we can go through it briefly. This was published on December 7th. This is Kate Cox. So for the first time in at least 50 years, a judge has intervened to allow an adult woman to terminate her pregnancy. That's weird wording to me, I guess because they haven't needed to intervene before, like because we've had protections. It was still really hard, even before Roe v. Wade was overturned, to access a termination at 21 weeks or even at 20 weeks in Texas. So don't mistake this article for saying that it used to be easy. It certainly wasn't. I have taken care of many, many, many patients in this situation in Texas. When Travis County Judge Maya Guerra Gamble handed down the temporary restraining order Thursday, Kate Cox, 31 of Dallas, burst into tears. Cox and her husband desperately wanted to have this baby. As I said, most of them are very wanted pregnancies, but her doctor said that continuing a non-viable pregnancy posed a risk to her health and future fertility, according to the lawsuit filed Tuesday, which is true, right? Because we've talked about this before. You are always at an increased risk of everything bad that can happen while you are pregnant. Being pregnant increases your risk of every complication, including complications that threaten your future fertility. They may not be really high risks depending on who you are, but they're always higher than not being pregnant. The idea that Ms. Cox wants desperately to be a parent and this law might actually cause her to lose that ability is shocking and would be a genuine miscarriage of justice. I don't like the wording of that. That's ironic and terrible, but yes, I do agree. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton responded Thursday afternoon in a letter addressed to 3 hospitals, Houston Methodist, Women's Hospital of Houston, and Texas Children's in Houston, saying that the temporary order would not insulate hospitals, doctors, or anyone else from civil or criminal liability for violating Texas abortion laws. Ken Paxton is a clown, and that's ridiculous. At 20 weeks pregnant, Cox learned that her fetus had full trisomy 18, a chromosomal abnormality that is almost always fatal before or soon after birth. Before the overturn of Roe v. Wade, Texas law allowed doctors to terminate pregnancies due to lethal anomalies at any point during the pregnancy. I don't know if that's accurate. There were still lots of laws about terminations past 20 weeks, and certainly not past 23, I don't think. But regardless, doesn't matter. We haven't been able to do any of that since the heartbeat law went into place in 2021, even before overturn of Roe v. Wade. Her doctors now had told her that the new abortion laws would prohibit abortion except when the life of the person who's pregnant was threatened. And again, I will refer you to a very popular clip of me saying, how threatened does one's life have to be? Where is the line? If we're going to make these laws, I need the line to be drawn, because your life is always at an increased risk during pregnancy as compared to outside of pregnancy. So what's my percent risk of death that I have to have? Is it 50%, 40, 30, 20, 18, 2? 0.05? What's the percent risk? If we're going to make laws like this, I need to know where we put the line. At the hearing, Jonathan Stone, a lawyer for the Texas Office of the Attorney General, imagine being an attorney for Ken Paxton, does not meet all of the elements to qualify for an exemption from abortion bans, at least on what was filed by her lawyers. Granting a temporary restraining order would require changing the medical exemption in Texas and then saying that the plaintiffs meet this changed, newly written standard. They argued that this would have permanent consequences in the form of abortion. Not permanent consequences. Oh no, we can't make laws that cause permanent consequences, not in Texas. The harm to Ms. Cox's life, health, and fertility are very much also permanent and cannot be undone. Cox's condition was rapidly deteriorating every day, and since the lawsuit was filed on Tuesday, she had already made a trip to the emergency room due to complications from her pregnancy. She's gone to the ER 4 times in the last month. In a filing last night, the state tried to argue that Cox was actually currently residing in Florida, where ironically and particularly relevant to this cause of action, she would qualify for an abortion under the state's medical exemptions. Jesus Christ, I had no idea we had more restrictions than Florida. I thought theirs was the same. I thought theirs was the same. God, it's always bigger in Texas, right? 45-minute Zoom hearing ensued, and Gamble, the judge, ruled that she should be able to terminate the pregnancy and that Dr. Carson in Houston would be able to do the procedure and would be protected from civil and criminal penalties if she performed the procedure. So in his letter to the hospitals, Ken Paxton, notable OBGYN and advocate for the people, said that no, actually, we're not going to let you do that, and I will put you in jail, Dr. Carson. Do not end this pregnancy, even though there's no good outcome scenario. This is nonsensical. Absolutely nonsensical. They are using us as pawns in their political game. There is absolutely no reason that this makes any sense. This isn't ending with a life of a healthy child. It's not happening. If the reason is because we're pro-life, that's not how this is ending. So I just want to bring attention to everybody right now that the reason for this is not being pro-life, right? It is control. Control, control, control. District Judge Jessica Mangrum previously ruled that the state's abortion bans should not apply to people with complicated pregnancies, including those facing lethal fetal diagnosis. What do you know? 2 judges in a red state with brains and hearts. Love to see it. Texas Right to Life said it's a gateway to allow abortions for any reason in Texas. Give me a break. A gateway? I can't. Can you imagine sitting in front of you is this person who has a very wanted pregnancy, who has been given the most devastating news of their life, and they are trying to make a decision where their only options are 2 really bad options. And you look them in the eye and say, no, sorry. Oh my God, this is nonsense. I can't. Here's what Texas Right to Life had to say to this family. Every child is uniquely precious and should continue to be protected in law, no matter how long or short the baby's life might be. The compassionate approach to these heartbreaking diagnoses is perinatal palliative care, which honors rather than ends the child's life. Listen, having sat at the bedside of these patients during both diagnoses, decision-making, and outcome, both with various forms of pregnancy termination as well as carrying the pregnancy as long as possible and delivering, and then sitting with these patients as their very wanted baby dies, I can tell you that the compassionate approach is letting these people make the decision that is best for them and their family and the baby that they are carrying. You don't get to decide what is compassionate for a fetus with a lethal anomaly if what you think is compassionate for the fetus is the opposite of compassionate for the person who's carrying it. Where is the compassion for Kate Cox? Where is the compassion for the person who's walking into the grocery store and having to answer those questions every day? Where is the compassion for the person with pregnancy complications requiring them to go to the emergency room 4 times in a month? And why does the fetus that they are carrying have a right to your bizarre idea of compassion, and no compassion is given to the person who is living and breathing right in front of you? And you know who makes compassionate decisions for babies that they really want but know are going to die? Their parents. This is heartbreaking and horrible and traumatic, even when they chose and had a choice to continue the pregnancy or not. So imagine how traumatic and heartbreaking that is if that's not what they wanted to do. And then you traumatize them by forcing them to go through this. So the December 7th was that initial decision that we just talked about. December 8th, after Travis County judge cleared the way for Kate Cox, who's 31, to terminate her pregnancy, Ken Paxton decided, nope, that's not happening. I refuse to agree. And I am the dictator of Texas. And as the dictator of Texas, I have decided that I, Ken Paxton, will not let you have the medical care you want and need that a judge says you should have access to. And it shouldn't have ever even had to be in front of a judge anyway, but here we are. Because I, Ken Paxton, am the dictator of Texas, I have decided that you don't need that medical care. And I don't care what your doctors said, because I'm the Texas dictator. December 11th, in a not at all shocking outcome, the Texas Supreme Court has decided that Dictator Paxton is correct and you can't have access to this healthcare because Dictator Paxton knows best. The ruling came down hours after Kate Cox's lawyers announced that she would be leaving the state to terminate the pregnancy because all of this holdup in court meant you're getting to a further and further gestational age. That means pregnancy and termination are both more and more dangerous each day that goes by. And the process of termination or even just delivery becomes more and more complicated. Supreme Court put the order on hold while they considered the merits of the case. Cox's condition continued to deteriorate in and out of the emergency room. Her health is on the line. This is why judges and politicians should not be making healthcare decisions for pregnant people. They are not doctors. Cox's lawyers said Monday afternoon that she left the state to seek termination and did not specify where or when the procedure was occurring. Rightfully so, because that would be dangerous. A few hours later, court issued its ruling and overturned the temporary restraining order. You know, I think the worst part of all of this part of it is that she knew, her lawyers said to her, apparently, and sensically, this is now going to the Supreme Court because Dictator Paxton said it should. And I just would like to let you know that we are 100% sure that the Supreme Court of Texas is not going to side with you on this because they really like Dictator Paxton and his inhumane laws. You should just go ahead and leave the state and make other arrangements because it's not going to happen. I feel like this is the right point where we have to talk about something we've talked about so many times before. This is not an option for everybody. Just leaving the state is not an option for most people. Most people do not have the ability to take off work for that amount of time, the money to travel across state lines. Texas is huge. If you live in Central or South Texas and you need to go access termination in a state outside of Texas, that's like an 8 or 10 hour drive. You also have to have the ability to find the information that you need. Where can I go? What clinics do these? What states? How do I get in touch with them? What are my options? Your doctor can't give you that information for threat of legal pushback. We are abandoning people. No one disputes that Ms. Cox's pregnancy has been extremely complicated. Oh, great. It is a very complicated pregnancy, but sorry. Too bad. Any parents would be devastated to learn that their unborn child had trisomy 18. The justices wrote, "Don't feign compassion here. Good Lord, this somehow makes it worse that they're like, yeah, we get it. This is awful and sad, but some difficulties in pregnancy, even serious ones, don't pose a heightened risk to the mother, and that's all the exception encompasses." Texas Supreme Court also heard arguments on Jarowski versus Texas, and that's the one that we've talked about previously. In both suits, Center for Reproductive Rights argues that doctors must be allowed to exercise their medical judgment and perform abortions when their good faith belief is that the procedure is necessary. How anybody could be opposed to that is beyond me. I just do not understand. The law says doctors must instead exercise reasonable medical judgment, which lawyers for the center has argued is vague and pushes doctors to wait until the patient is close to death before acting. Very interesting. I do believe we have heard somebody say that before, and I do believe that person is from Texas. And if you're taking solace in the life of the mother exemption, you have fallen victim to the propaganda. Having exemptions for a life-threatening emergency is not enough. People will die, because when does your life become in danger? Life is always at risk in pregnancy, more so than when you are not pregnant. So at what point, how dead must my patient be, must your daughter be, must your sister be before the doctor can act? What percentage of near death do we need before we can do our job without getting criminal charges filed against us? Where is the line? You can't tell me, because we don't know, and that is why these things are dangerous. Justices said that the law does not ask a doctor to wait until the mother is within an inch of death or her bodily impairment is fully manifest or practically irreversible. The exception does not mandate that the doctor in a true emergency must await consultation. The exception is predicated on a doctor acting within the zone of reasonable medical judgment, which is what doctors do every day. I'm sorry, I don't think it's reasonable medical judgment to force someone to stay pregnant with a non-viable pregnancy for funsies. Texas Tribune documented a story in October of a woman who could not afford to leave the state and carried a non-viable pregnancy to term. Oh, this is the same one. So conjoined twins. And also conjoined twins, you know what else that is? That is a C-section. You're not just forcing people to carry a non-viable pregnancy. Now you are also forcing them to undergo a major abdominal surgery. Not a single person who actually cares about health and well-being could argue with a straight face that this makes any fucking sense. This is so insane. Also, can I please remind you, we don't have universal health care. So you're not only forcing people to do this, you're forcing them to pay for it. She doesn't have the money to leave the state, and you are forcing her to pay for a C-section and a hospital stay. I remember a patient who had a very premature baby that I delivered, and I still speak with this patient actually. This was when I was in training. I finished training in 2017, so it was a long time ago now. She had a very premature baby and she had a C-section, and I was sitting with her in the NICU that night, and the baby was not doing well. And I remember hugging her, and she was sobbing. And she said to me, I'm going to have my staples in her C-section incision. This is back when we used staples. I'm going to have my staples longer than I have my baby. That hit me so hard. I still almost have trouble breathing when I think about it. And that is something that now she has to live as well. This is what you voted for. This is what you picket for. This is what you are doing.